Season 1, Episode 4.
Welcome to Forever Break Podcast. Now, she's good with accents, but he's never understood a word she said. Here are your hosts, Lianne and Corey.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Forever Break Podcast, where this season we are going to be exploring all things mindfulness.
Yeah, we are.
And today we are going to be looking at love and relationships.
Ooh la la.
Ooh la la, indeed. We're going to be looking how mostly everyone has the desire to be loved and wanted, and how loving ourselves first is essential to a solid relationship.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about the 5 love languages, and we've got a fantastic interview with Dr. Aron, who really just gave us some really sound advice. I think you guys will benefit a lot from it, so stick around for that interview. As always, be sure to check out the Forever Break website, foreverbreak.com, and take an even deeper dive into any of these topics.
Quick quote.
Mr. Gary Chapman says, "Love is something you do for someone else, not something you do for yourself."
Take that to the bank, make a deposit, and then cash that deposit later in life.
And give it to someone else, because otherwise it's not real.
Focus on.
All right, we are focusing on relationships. Some people choose to be single and are completely content, but everyone has close relationships in some form or another, and wanting to be loved is a universal human desire. Even if you don't want a romantic relationship, you can apply some of the advice in this episode to your close non-romantic relationships like family or friends. You might not know this, but both of us were single for quite a while as well.
We certainly were. And happiness in a relationship definitely requires being happy within yourself. For some brutally honest practical tips on that, make sure you check out episode 1 on mindfulness and self-love with Chris Armstrong. Super helpful. But think about some patterns in your current or previous relationships. We all know someone who dates for 3 to 6 months, then moves on to someone new. This might even be you.
Honeymoon phase.
Honeymoon phase addiction.
Perhaps the problem isn't with the partners, but an internal dissatisfaction. By loving ourselves, we can better receive the love of others and also share our love in return. If you have any patterns in dating or relationships that you can't break free and or explain, check out our episode on epigenetics and see if there might be some traits in your family's history that can be attributed.
If you can shift the blame from yourself, always a winner.
Yeah, definitely.
That is not solid advice, do not quote me. However, we have found in our experience that entering into a relationship with the best possible version of you is ideal. So what does that actually mean? Knowing your values, your deal breakers, how you handle life and difficult situations, and having the confidence to be able to communicate that to your partner.
Yeah, so for instance, I've had 2 major relationships in my life. One about 7 years ago, and then currently this one with Lianne. I can see vast differences between going into both of those, and the biggest thing is that after that first one, I spent a lot of time on my own trying to learn about myself, what things matter most to me, and how I can just be a better overall contributing partner to a relationship, and hopefully I'm putting that into practice.
Yet to be determined.
So, do you have any thoughts or experience with this?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as I like to remind you and everyone else, that I am so much younger, so I don't quite have the year disparity between my relationships.
I also think that you just have, at 27 years old, I think that you have this very acute awareness of who you are, compared to me anyway at that age. Yeah. And it took me some time to work on that and figure that out, and I think that you're just very lucky in that sense. You've just done...
Yeah, I'm very independent, and I've always been very self-assured about that. And I think, yeah, you're right. I've just been very fortunate in life that I have the confidence to say what I think.
Yeah.
But I definitely see a growth within myself coming from that first relationship to how I am with you. I'll always speak my mind, but maybe in the first relationship, the guy kind of treated me very badly. And I was just kind of, standard teenager, like, oh, yeah, I mean, okay, he said sorry, it's going to be fine. Yeah. Whereas, like, now, if he did half of the shit that he did to me, I'd be like, okay, Corey, this isn't going to work. But you wouldn't. But communication, and I think that is the biggest thing that I've noticed, and I'm sure you've noticed between your relationships, is that this is just such a great anchor for any good relationship. If you start the pattern of good communication early and don't falter from it, then what could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, I mean, this is where mindfulness comes into play, right? Are we being petty? Are we looking for a win-win to an argument? Or are you trying to hurt your partner? These are the types of questions that I think you need to ask yourself. And that's the kind of thing that just can kind of make these little small disagreements or something like turn into this big blown up thing where you might be angry. And, you know, another key piece of advice that someone told me a long time ago, try not to fall asleep angry.
Yeah.
I like that rule.
Yeah, I like that rule too. Mostly because I wake up angry.
Digging deeper.
So, moving on to love languages. They were originally identified in Gary Chapman's iconic book. And even in seemingly stable relationships, one or both parties can feel unloved if their, in quotation marks, love tank,
Love tank.
love
baby,
gun,
love tank.
is empty. If their partner is not speaking their love language.
So the 5 love languages are words of affirmation, quality time, acts of service, gifts, and physical touch. We actually did the online test for love languages, and here is what we discovered. For me, my top 2 were physical touch and words of affirmation. Lianne, what were yours?
Mine, so coming in top was quality time, and then followed closely by words of affirmation and physical touch.
She likes that QT.
I do. I just need to know that everyone loves me.
I think that since we've taken this test, we've just kind of tried to be a little bit more mindful of this.
Yeah.
It is just something that I know that Lianne likes quality time, so I try to give that to her. And with me, she just is hands on me all the time to the point of embarrassment in public, so we don't have any issues there.
Come closer. Let me stroke your nipples.
No, but really, it's just kind of a good thing. And I think that these languages, they're not just for your spouse or whoever that might be, your loving partner. This can work in friendships. It can work in the office with employers and employees. Just knowing how to communicate with people.
Yeah, like paint that picture. If person A, you know that they respond really well to physical touch in the office, if you want to congratulate them, give them a hug, give them if it's appropriate, give them like a pat on the back or something like that. If they're feeling down, give them some kind of human connection, some contact. And I think it's just so beneficial, like you said, in any relationship. If you know what that person responds to, you can more successfully convey what you want them to feel.
Yeah, I really agree with that. Go ahead and check our show notes. We're going to link you guys to that test and also to the book if you want to read that. Highly recommended. And this is just one essential tool for a strong relationship, and we would rather learn from an expert on the subject. So we'll explore some more in our interview with Dr. Arthur Aron.
Expert interview.
So today we have the absolute pleasure of interviewing Dr. Arthur Aron. Dr. Aron has studied human psychology since receiving his bachelor's degree from Berkeley in 1967, great year, followed by a PhD in social psychology in 1970. He is the creator of the 36 Questions That Lead to Love quiz and has enjoyed over 50 years of marriage to his wife, Dr. Lianne Aron.
All right. Well, we are here with Dr. Art Aron. Doctor, how are you today?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
Great. Really appreciate you taking some time to be with us and hoping that all is well with you and yours. And just wanted to say, congratulations on being married for over 50 years with Dr. Lianne Aron, who's an accomplished researcher in her own right and who discovered the trait of high sensitivity. A 50-year marriage is obviously a major accomplishment. So if you could just take a little time machine back to 1967 when you married Lianne and give yourself one piece of advice, what would that be?
Well, I didn't really need advice. We were just very fortunate. A huge factor in whether a relationship is going to work is the two individuals having good skills at communicating and handling conflict and stuff. My wife, Lianne, was being trained as a clinical psychologist. I was a social psychologist studying interaction. So we right away knew a lot about communication. We never thought about that when we met, but that's played a big role.
Yeah, that just made it change the game, really, doesn't it? Because I think that's something that people commonly have in relationships, right? They don't want to communicate so directly with one another.
I think it seems to kind of slip up over time. That longevity I think that you guys have is something that I think is just really remarkable. So congrats on that.
And tell us about your 36 questions. So you developed the famous list of 36 questions that compel people to fall in love. Can you tell us the experience of perhaps one couple who have fallen in love by asking these questions?
Well, actually, I should say that the procedure was not developed to get people to fall in love, but it can help. The procedure was developed so that in the laboratory, we could measure closeness. And if we bring two people into the lab and, they're already friends, they have a different history, and so forth. So we wanted to be able in 45 minutes to randomly assign pairs of people to get close or not. But getting close can be a big factor in falling in love. And one of the things that happened early on is that we were pre-testing the procedure, pilot testing it, and a couple of the research assistants in our lab who were working on other projects did the procedure. And they fell in love, and I haven't been in touch with them for some years, but at least 10 years ago, which was still a long time, they were still together and happy.
Wow. How funny to just see that all happen and just in front of you. You're like, oh, wow, unintentionally.
Love that.
There's 2 or 3 things that make that procedure get people close. And that's really valuable for people to understand because, it's fine to use the 36 questions on a date or something, although if you do it on more than 1 or 2 dates, your answers become rote.
Yeah.
So what's really valuable is to understand why it's working. And it's when we created it based on what was known about how people spontaneously become close. And we really put in 3 things. The biggest is that when you get close to someone, it's important to reveal personal things and to hear personal things from the other, but not too fast and not just one way. So if you're riding on a plane with someone and they're just going on and on and on, that's not going to work. But if I say something a little bit personal, and then they say something, and it's important not to reveal too much too fast because it's sort of scary to the other person and how they might respond. But that gradually escalating more and more personal both ways. It's really important to be listening and also to feel you're being listened to. So that's a big part of it. And the other 2 things are that thinking the other person is similar. In the 36 questions, after it's gone on a little while, we have some items like mention some things you've noticed you have in common. We don't ever say mention some things you don't have in common.
Yeah.
Keep it positive.
Well, actually, it can be a benefit in some ways to be different, but mostly we want to feel we're the same. And but I'll come back to this difference in a few minutes because it's also a benefit to my wife and I that we're different in some important ways.
Mm-hmm.
But the third thing is letting the other person know you like them. Again, in the 36 questions, after it's gone on a little while, we have some items like, name some things you like about the other person. Again, we don't say things you don't like. That's not an advantage to dislike anything. But it's important to feel your life. People used to feel that playing hard to get was a good idea. It turns out it's not. I mean, it's good to play hard for other people to get you, but not for this person.
Yeah. I do always wonder where that idea came from, that whole hard to get thing. Like, where does that come from? Because that's just, I get it at first, I guess, but like, it doesn't make sense logically. As an adult, it doesn't make much sense.
People want what they can't have or something like that?
Well, if you can overcome some obstacle, that adds something to it. And that may be why. And you might want to make, I think it may come from people wanting the person to think you're hard for everyone to get. So you're special if you're getting me.
Okay.
It is an advantage for the person to think other people you're hard for other people to get, but not for you.
Okay.
I do like that. So, you've been obviously in this field, and I saw a video on you as we were kind of researching for this interview, and it said something along the lines of how you had, I think, like a mentor or an instructor while you were in college that said, find a field of study that it's along the lines of someone tells you it's an impossible thing to study. And you stumbled into this love and attraction and these types of things. And it made me think of, for our listeners who might be single in wanting to find the right partner. You've been studying this for so long. So what advice would you offer to help prepare people who are single, looking for a new relationship, but what kinds of things can they do as they're in that search to be working on themselves?
Well, I think yourself is a big factor once you've formed a relationship. People like to think it's the match or the other person. The biggest, pretty much the biggest effect of the quality of a relationship is who you are. If you're anxious or depressed, at the beginning, it might be exciting, but then you start blaming it on the other person. So getting yourself as healthy mentally and physically as you can is really valuable. And, if you're not doing very well, then psychotherapy, or just if you're doing reasonably well, meditation is a good practice. My wife and I, we've been together 50 years. We've been meditating almost 50 years, and which we do together. But anything you can do to strengthen yourself. And of course, learning some communication skills, although that can be done with a new partner. So that's probably the biggest thing you can do as you're looking for someone.
Make sure that you're happy with you first. And I guess on the other side of that sword, there's some advice for some listeners who are single. How about some advice for listeners who are already in relationships? What are some practical steps that they can take to communicate more effectively with their partner and resolve inevitable conflicts?
Well, there's quite a bit we know about what can make a good relationship and and even more, what can make a really strong, passionate relationship. Once you're in a relationship, again, who you are continues to matter. So anything you can do to make yourself, as healthy and strong and well off and not, as you can is good. But beyond that, sort of, you can take a marital enrichment course together, or a premarital training course in communication skills. Those are valuable things to do, and they're widely available. And then another really important thing is sort of learning how to handle stress. Time like this right now, of course, there's a lot of stress, and stress is a huge factor in how people manage things in their life. And of course, we can't usually control the stress we're under, but we can try to understand that when we're under stress, we may not behave well, and we may not think very deeply about what our partner is doing. If they do one thing that's annoying, we may only remember the other times they did things like that.
Yeah, that's true.
There's this saying, you shouldn't throw everything into the kitchen sink. And learning to handle conflicts, when you get into a conflict, try to take the perspective. Ideally, when you're in a conflict, try to stand back and both of you take the perspective of a third person who cares about you, but, wants things to work out. Is not either of you. There's some new research showing that's a really valuable thing. And another thing, and something I know my wife and I have done from the beginning, is to have strong, deep couple friendships with other couples. That's really helpful. And in fact, one of the ways that couples can use these 36 questions is to do it as a foursome with another couple. So each of the four of you answer each question. And you can do this by Zoom if you're on, if they're not available or they're across the country. But even if, my wife and I have done the 36 questions with other couples a few times, so we can't keep doing them. But we have one couple, for example, that we've been friends with for years, and we have a fairly regular Zoom 4-way conference call with them and really talk about the depth of what's been going on in the last week or two and go deeply into it.
I like that.
And of course, your family matters too. And trying to keep good connections with your, parents-in-law and brothers and sisters, all of that's important. So those are things that can sort of make a relationship pretty good. And then there's some things that can make it, after a little while, there's that excitement when you first form a relationship, and then it settles down. And so what can you do to reinvigorate that? And we know 2-3 things. One of them that my research with Elaine has been a lot on is to do exciting things together. Not just the same old, not just enjoyable, but things that are new and challenging and interesting. That's really a valuable thing. And then another one that's so simple. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say agree, because I guess it's all about keeping things fresh and exciting and, not getting I think that's what happens in relationships. People get stuck in a routine, exactly, and it's becomes a bit monotonous, like anything does when it's too routine. But it's just keeping things fresh and exciting, right?
Yeah, I mean, routines are valuable for keeping things, running well, but you need to also, have a date night and go on a trip that's really different, do something special with your partner. Take a cooking class together, do something different and challenging that's fun for both of you, and that you can do together.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then another thing that's so simple, there's wonderful research by Shelley Gable and Harry Research, and now lots of people have shown that a simple thing you can do with any relationship is to celebrate your partner's successes. Turns out that's even more positively valuable than supporting them when things go badly. That's also important. But your partner has something good happen, let them know. I mean, don't be over the top, but, my favorite example is my wife, who does this research on highly sensitive person, and I collaborate with her, and she collaborates with. That's one of the exciting things we do together. Geekily enough, we collaborate on research, which is exciting because you spend a year doing a study, and then you sit down with the data. Did it work? But an example I love is that she'd submitted this paper. I was a co-author, but it was a really important paper to a very top scientific journal that only accepts a tiny proportion of papers. And we didn't think it had much chance. We thought we'd end up submitting it somewhere else. And I was home when the email came in that said the editor and the reviewers loved it and they're going to publish it. And so I made a poster of that email and put it on the front door for when she came home.
That's so sweet.
Now, I had just like that week read about supporting your partner's successes, celebrating them, and I said, well, let's try it. We had a great night.
Yeah,
that's fantastic. And I mean, given some of these ideas of things that you can do, obviously there's factors that partners need to accept. And acceptance on its own is a huge part of getting through and having a long-term relationship. So are there any factors that partners should accept that they can't do anything about and try not to change? I mean, I think that this could be pretty wide ranging, but kind of on that macro scale, is there anything that, people should be watching out for and just be like, these are things that might happen that I just need to accept and move on from?
Well, I think, lots of things happen in life like that. But I think differences, one of the things I mentioned earlier, the differences can be a benefit as well as a difficulty. So, we've mentioned my wife's work on highly sensitive people, about 20, 30% of the population of humans, and actually 20, 30% within at least 100 species that have been studied, have this trait of being highly sensitive. Mm-hmm. They notice things others miss. They pick up on details, but they also, because of that, get easily overwhelmed. And so if if one of you is highly sensitive and one of you is not, each of you can sort of, well, why isn't my partner like me? Why do they get burned out so easily? Or why is my partner always pushing me to, do things?
Yeah.
But when you realize there's an advantage to both ways. So my wife and I, she's highly sensitive. I'm not. Like when we go on a trip, when we get there, she's usually worn out. And I go out and look around and find a restaurant for us to eat dinner. So it's a benefit to her and it's a benefit to me. Now, on the other hand, we go out, we're walking on a trail, and she notices these beautiful flowers or beautiful birds that I just wasn't seeing, points them out to me, as well as noticing problems. Wait, be careful. So, it's a benefit of having differences that can be there. And so if you see differences, one thing to look for is there some benefit to me? Now, not everything can be changed. It's problematic, and anything you can do to support your partner if they're trying to change it, if they've got some problem, that's fine. But, look to what's valuable in the partnership and in the other person, and keep your attention on that to the extent you can.
Yeah, I think that just kind of goes back into what we kind of started with on this, and that's being comfortable enough with yourself and knowing what your partner needs in terms of themselves, so that if you get into that situation where you show up to a vacation and you've been planning it for a few months, getting really excited about it together, but you show up and one person's just drained from the travel and is like, I just want to hang out and rest so that I can enjoy the rest of the trip. And the other person is, well, I kind of feel like going out and exploring. It's having that acceptance of saying, well, we're going to go our separate ways. That doesn't mean we're not going to spend our vacation together, not getting overly critical about that kind of thing and just being like, okay, it's time to just go our separate ways. And I think that in the long run, we'll probably end up having a better vacation about it regardless, rather than just beating ourselves up about being in a different place right here. I think that that's a really good way to look at it too.
Yeah, and not just look at that, allowing the separation time is good for us, which is important, but also that sometimes that separation time is actually more beneficial than if you hadn't taken it. That you each can bring different things to the relationship.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'm going to take you backwards to the stress, because you were talking about, stress and tension. And inevitably in our modern society, with just the kind of work schedules we have and what life throws at you, it's going to happen. So let's go talk about some things that couples can do better to handle stress and support each other's mental health.
Our current quarantine situation being a perfect example.
Yes, I mean, the quarantine thing is really intense for people. I mean, for my wife and I, we work so much from home anyway, doing our research, analyzing data and communicating with colleagues from home to a large extent. But no, people feel trapped in, even if they're alone, let alone if they're with a partner. They can feel trapped in with the partner as well as supported by the partner. But what can you do? There's one issue is what you can do with this particular quarantine, but more generally, handling stress, it's a big part of it is just understanding that stress limits your mental abilities. You're not seeing the big picture. And so to the extent when you're under stress, you can stand back and look at the bigger picture and not just see this immediate costs or difficulties, but also all the benefits that go with the partner or the circumstances. That's really valuable. And to realize that you're going to misbehave as well as the partner is going to misbehave if you're both under stress, and to understand that it's due to the stress. It's not how you always are. Just those understandings can be helpful. And of course, anything you can do to mitigate the stress is great. But
yeah.
One of the things that some people we know told us about they do as a couple to make it not seem like same old, is they go to separate rooms, or they go into the closet separately and dress up as different people and pretend like they're meeting each other for the first time at a bar and sit at the table.
Yeah, I've heard that works really well for particularly couples who've been together for a while. I've heard about that working.
I think Vince Vaughn and Reese Witherspoon did it in a movie.
Oh, they did.
Well, another way of doing something like that has a little different outcomes is if you have children, you can create a play with them. We have grandchildren. We actually created a play with one of our grandchildren who was by Zoom, and then we performed the play to the rest of our grandchild's family.
Oh, that's great.
On Zoom. And that was fun. So making up plays with your children or with friends by Zoom, writing a play together, that can be a fun, exciting, novel thing to do.
I do find tapping into that creative energy and just trying to bring out that inner child as we all continue to get older and that kind of thing is just healthy within a relationship. It's healthy overall. I know that just kind of having this podcast project throughout quarantine has been really beneficial to Lianne and I, because even though we're spending all this time together, we can, focus our energy on this other thing, and it kind of takes away from the stress of being together all the time and that kind of stuff. So I think that getting creative with those kinds of ideas, like what it seems like you guys have an endless fountain of, is just amazing. I think that's just such good advice for people. I'm wondering how you kind of would advise couples in terms of balance and their individual needs and identity, and then balancing that with supporting their partner. And how can couples tell when their relationship is out of balance?
Well, I'm not sure there's any easy way to know, but, people differ in what they need. We all, we want to bring to our partner something special and a fresh self. And to do that, we need some time separately. Now, that can be time just sitting, both of you sitting with your eyes closed and meditating. It can be being in different rooms. It can be talking to friends on Zoom, or if you're out doing things with friends differently. People need different things to do. But then you bring that to the partner, and just as you bring what's your partner to your friendships and your other activities in your life. And I think, I'm not sure, we don't know really from the research how much it differs between people. The kinds of things people need to do or want to do separately differs, of course, greatly. But I think everyone needs some time separately. And it's very important when you take time separately to make it clear that it's not just that you don't want to be with your partner. It's that you need time alone, or you need time with other friends for its own sake, not that you want to be away from your partner. Now, of course, you may want to be away from your, if it's been over the top, but it's important to focus as you can on the benefits from doing it for yourself and through yourself being happier for your partner, rather than on needing to be away from your partner. It's more that you need, as you put it, a balance. You need some of each.
And keeping your own identity is so important in relationships as well, right? So I think a lot of time, particularly in new relationships, people get very lost within one another. And I know I've had failed relationships where, we've kind of like got lost in between instead of just keeping your separate identity and stuff. So I feel like that kind of coincides with that idea of, keeping yourself separate, but still complementing each other.
Yeah.
Which is a nice idea. So we know your wife, Elaine, is a highly sensitive person. She's written several books to help highly sensitive people thrive, and her work has brought so much awareness to this often misunderstood trait. And you guys have actually created a documentary together about sensitivity and relationships called Sensitive Lovers, a deeper look into their relationships. Now, you've kind of already covered what is the most important thing for someone in a relationship with a highly sensitive person, to kind of respect their boundaries and understand their needs. But can you tell us a little bit more about the documentary?
Well, documentary is interesting. This came about first from we were making a documentary on relationships more generally, and we had a lot of enactments, and it turned into a real movie, a story movie that was based on it. And it was a highly sensitive person in relationships with a not highly sensitive person, and how that worked, and over time. And it's a real story, Sensitive and in Love movie. But after the movie was made, which we're really happy about and people have really been enjoying, we thought, well, we were able to make, in the movie, people were acting in ways and trying to show what the research shows. But we thought it might be valuable to add a little, an hour or so of talking heads, of sort of going through some of the scenes in that movie and talking about, okay, what do they tell us about how people should be, and what does the research say? And so my wife and I sat down with the director of the movie, and we selected some scenes, and the scenes are shown, and then we discuss, or in some cases we discuss first that particular topic. So if the topic is like needing time alone, as you pointed out, or the topic is appreciating what each other brings to the relationship, or how to handle things that arise differently. And so we go through those things and then use the scene to illustrate it. And so that's what this new documentary is. And you don't need to have seen the movie first.
Well, that's so helpful.
Yeah, we hope so. You don't need to see the movie Sensitive in Love first, but it's probably a good idea to. It's probably even more fun that way. And then you get those scenes sort of.
Yeah.
You guys have seen it?
We have not, no, but I'm intrigued because we did an episode with the highly sensitive people as well. And it's just, this is a completely new topic for both of us. And I mean, that sounds just so fascinating. I think that's going to be on our
part of our angle on this was we kind of wanted to gear the podcast to have us as hosts kind of be active, participating audience. And so we tried to limit our research. We didn't want to just be completely green to everything that we're talking about. So we researched it a little bit, but we didn't want to go too in depth just because we wanted to have natural reactions and hopefully think of questions through the interview process that, an audience member who's hearing this maybe for the first time about what a highly sensitive person is or is looking for relationship guidance and that kind of thing. We just wanted to be able to give like a more natural reaction and try and react as if we were the audience. But it's on the list.
Yeah.
I might say that you guys probably haven't even taken the self-test to see if you are likely to be highly sensitive, although learning about it, you probably know. But one of the things we found in our research is that two highly sensitive people, or a couple where one is highly sensitive or one is not, or a couple where neither are highly sensitive, are about equally likely to be happy.
Yeah.
It's but how they handle when can make a big difference.
Yeah. Just being aware.
Especially for the highly sensitive, even for two highly sensitives, there's a special strain in that because it's a minority trait, even though it's not a negative trait, because it's a minority trait, they may each be expecting the other to be different than they are. And even expecting themselves to be different. Once they understand the trait, it makes a big difference.
Well, that's something we found so fascinating because we did actually take the test to discuss the results with the person that we had interviewed. And so I think we were both a 4, weren't we? So neither of us qualified.
She was a 4 and I was a 6. We were both pretty low. But one of the things that caught my eye was that I seem to be more highly sensitive in the evening.
Yeah.
And I get more acutely annoyed by sounds and like the volume of things just seem to go up, kind of like how commercials go up versus the show. And it just is something that as we were going through the questions and then falling asleep one night, I was just like sitting there grinding my teeth because Lianne, every little noise she was making. And I was like, probably because we're just studying highly sensitive people is because I'm noticing this, but I think time of day might be something for me.
It's fascinating.
That's an interesting question. We've never looked at that in our research or any of the research. Not all our research. There's hundreds of people doing research on this now, but I don't think any of them have looked at time of day. That would be an interesting thing to look at.
Hey, if you need a guinea pig, I owe you one.
And I'm really bad in the morning too.
So as Forever Break website and the podcast, we also are going to be covering a lot of things travel, obviously, once the global chaos that we're currently in settles down a little bit. So thinking about that in terms of relationships, what advice might you provide to someone traveling with their partner for the first time? And also, what can couples do to nurture their relationship while they're traveling?
Well, the main thing is that, especially after it's gone on a little while, is to make it an interesting, newish trip with new aspects and so forth. But you want it to be as comfortable as you can. And that's true from the beginning. You want to be sure that you've planned things that would be hassles and to minimize the hassle side of it to the extent you can, realistically. It's worth spending the time in advance to keep the difficulties and hassles down, because they create stressors that not only interfere with enjoying the trip, they can interfere with your relationship. On the other hand, if the practical sides of it are running fairly smoothly and you're appreciating together this new and interesting stuff, that's wonderful. So you want to focus on making it that way. And again, people differ in how much they want to see new things. But if you're going to the same place, if you can see new aspects of it, that's really, my wife and I try every year to take a walking trip in France. We love walking on the trails from village to village. But we've probably done 50 of these, or maybe not quite that many, but quite a few week-long walking trips. But we've never walked on the same trail twice, even though we've been in the same regions.
Oh, really?
And it's so interesting.
Yeah. France is gorgeous as well, isn't it? There's so much nature there to see. And everywhere's slightly different.
Mm-hmm.
I like it.
But we've done some other countries too. But we want to, again, we haven't done any third world countries because we want to keep it. But some people would enjoy that. But if you do that, you want to be sure you do it in a way that's protected and comfortable. We like to go on our own just as a twosome, and we want to be in a safe place. So we've done a lot of places in Europe, and we've done New Zealand and such, but we haven't really we took one walk in a third world country, and we had a guide there, and so we were protected.
Yeah, and that's nice because then you get a lot of information about the local area as well as experiencing the new experience that you guys want to do together.
Yeah, we also have taken a couple of our walking trips with another couple, and that was fun.
Nice.
As a foursome.
Yeah, I think that kind of stuff is just really good to do. And like you said, just kind of the limiting of the stress and just, if you're someone who likes to go into things with a little bit less of a plan, at least to start, if it's your first time traveling with a partner, I think that it's just kind of smart to just take that kind of stuff off the plate, try and make it a nice, smooth experience. And you'll create a fond memory, and hopefully the bond will grow over that. So really just great advice overall. And we just thank you so much for giving us some of your time. We know that you guys are very busy, and your experience and your expertise is just so valuable to us and hopefully all of our listeners. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Interview digestion.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aron, for all of that amazing, insightful information. What did you take away from it, Corey?
I mean, I think that it's just what I take away is that his 50 years of marriage is work, and they just continue to think of creative ways to keep it fresh, keep it fun, keep discovering new things about each other, and just overall just being mindful of we've just got to daily do things to make this relationship lasting and loving, and I want to show you that I love you, you show me that you love me. And we just continue to make it a practice. And I think it's probably along the lines of the more you practice, the more you get out of it, the easier it is.
Yeah, it just becomes a habit just to be more mindful. Well, just mindfulness in general, right? The whole point of this is to start adapting it as a regular habit subconsciously. And I mean, the things that they do after 50 years and they're still doing these things to kind of spruce up their marriage, I think that is just such an important takeaway for people in relationships. And again, like we mentioned earlier, the whole self-love thing, personally, I just think that's so important. How can you expect anyone to like you if you're not so happy with yourself?
Be the best version of yourself. Try to find who that is and then bring that person into a relationship, because it's probably going to have that. I mean, just logic tells me that's going to have that much more of a success rate. And
if you try everything you possibly can and someone can't accept you for your best, then you just got to be like, well, this is my best me, so this isn't obviously going to work. So
I will say we should be a little bit cautious with those 36 questions. So we're actually going to take his advice, I think, and do that with some friends of ours. Yeah. And I think that it's just going to be a really fun project to do. Yeah. But it's just a really cool thing. But obviously, if you're listening to this and you start looking more into that, I don't think it's a good idea to go and spring those questions on every first date that you have. No. One, because your questions your answers to the questions are going to be uniform, so there's not going to be that spontaneity and stuff like that. And two, you want to maybe wait for a few dates in, or else you just don't know who you're talking about it to. And
I will say, because we did have a read through of them, and I'm not particularly soppy, and it does make me a bit uncomfortable. But that's also something that I think, I mean, I'm sure I'm not alone with that, but I think that's something that can be really beneficial, is being out of your comfort zone and to think about this, especially with, I guess, because we'll be doing it with some of Corey's friends that I don't know super well. It's it's going to be a big deal.
Yeah.
So,
but it's going to be fun.
Guys, if you're going to do this back home in your relationships, you are not alone if you're uncomfortable with them. But let's all try it together.
Yeah, why not? And then it's also been shown to help rekindle. So if you're in a long relationship, this doesn't exclude you. Sit down with your partner, have a glass of wine and go over some of these questions and just kind of remember some of this stuff. I think it's a really cool process. So highly recommended.
Take it further.
And if you guys want to take this further, for links to Dr. Aron's 36 questions quiz and other works, please see our show notes page. Warning, these questions are very powerful. Be careful who you use them on. It's an elixir of sorts. We really do highly recommend reading the 5 love languages. I was recommended this book when I was going through a breakup a handful of years ago. And it really just helped me. It just helped me to kind of even take my mind off of stuff and learn a little bit more about myself. Mm-hmm. We're going to have a link to that.
And at the very minimum, we're going to also link to the tests that we took so you can learn more about how you naturally give and receive love. If you don't want to read the book, just take the tests, share it with your partner.
And we'll also include some information on where to find Dr. Aron's and Dr. Elaine Aron's documentary and movie, because that sounds super interesting. I know I'm going to go watch that. So
yeah. And if you haven't yet listened to it, we do have an episode that kind of goes and takes a deeper dive into highly sensitive people. So check that out as well.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode all about love. You can take Dr. Aron's 36 question test online if you just Google his name, and the questions are extremely famous and they just come up straight away on a whole bunch of websites. And you can also check out his books. They're available to order paperback on Amazon.
And the amazing movie that he and his wife made is called Sensitive, the Movie. And if you visit sensitivethemovie.com, you can learn more about that project.
Make sure you join us on episode 5, where we are going to be exploring highly sensitive people. Now, we covered this on a smaller scale with Dr. Aron, but we will be delving deeper with Dr. Bianca Acevedo to learn more about this subject.
And we'll be looking into where you can take a test to figure out if you are HSP and what you and your partner can do to be aware of it. All right, you know what to do, voiceover guy.
Thanks, Corey. You're my guy. Subscribe now to the Forever Break podcast on your favorite platform: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and more. If you enjoyed this episode, help us out and leave a 5-star review. And remember, you can find all the juicy details discussed in this episode in the show notes at foreverbreak.com/podcast.